Hello, my name is Martin Flint, and I hope I'm going to answer the question, is genealogy the same as family history? Well, the two terms are often used synonymously, but I think they're very different. And in the next few minutes, I hope I'm going to persuade you there is a difference between genealogy and family history, and why it's important for you to become a family historian rather than a genealogist. Genealogy is about dates, the dates of your ancestors' births, their marriages, when their children were born, and ultimately their deaths. And there's a lot of information you can pick available to be picked up. If you go back to 1837, there are the censuses from 1841 onwards, which you can pick up from ancestry.co.uk and findmypast.co.uk, and obviously also from ancestry.com. Civil registration will give you the actual births, marriage and death certificates, and use two sites in conjunction to obtain these certificates. First one, freebmd.org.uk, to find the certificate you want, and you'll order it from the government site gro.gov.uk. Before 1837, you're relying on parish registers, and the first place to look for them is on the Mormon site familysearch.com, and you have a look at the Mormons International Genealogical Index, IGI for short, which will give you records of baptisms, marriages and burials. Now, the Mormons, for religious reasons, weren't too bothered about burials. So if you actually want a complete genealogical record of your ancestors, you'll probably have to look at the parish registers themselves. And you can obtain them from the Mormons in their family history centres, and they'll be available on microfilms. However, the Mormons don't have all the parish registers, and you probably have to go to the national and local archives in the UK for a complete list of parish registers. Now, genealogy was historically important for inheritance. It was very important to know who the next king was going to be, who was the rightful heir of a duke and duchess, and even who would inherit from a wealthy man with no children, say. But with genealogy, if we come forward to the present day, you basically end up with a list of dates. So, for example, you'll find an ancestor was born in 1800 and he married in 1820. He had 5 or 6 children between 1825 and 1840. You'll find him on the censuses, hopefully in 1841, and you'll see that he died sometime, say, in the 1850s. But what do you know about that particular ancestor, or ancestors in general, for this information? And I think the answer is basically not a lot. So come on to family history. Family history basically takes the genealogical dates and fill in the gaps. It fills in the gaps. It basically puts flesh on the bones, as it were. Family history is actually about discovering who your ancestors were, about basically how they lived, what kind of people they were, what they did, how they worked, the problems they got into. Much, much more than just a list of dates. How do you build your family history then? Well, if you're looking for ancestors in the 20th century, you're probably lucky you've got a lot of living relatives. You probably have your own birth certificate and marriage certificates. If your parents are living, you can talk to them and obtain their own births and marriages and possibly the death certificates. And you can talk to aunts and uncles and grandparents. If you're going back to the 19th century, then in addition to censuses and births, marriage and death certificates, you should start looking at other sources like poor law, workhouse records, Most of our ancestors were actually poor, and you'll be surprised how many you'll actually find actually had to partake of poor law and workhouse relief. Some of your ancestors may have actually joined the military, the army, the navy. They may well have been in prison. And the interesting thing about those particular records is, in the days before photography, that's the only way you're going to get an idea of what your ancestors looked like. Lots of other sources, newspapers, school lists, jobs, wills, a whole host of information, much more than people normally look for because they just concentrate on censuses and certificates. If you want to go even earlier than the 19th century, and it's certainly possible, then you have a look at what is termed as parish chest information. We've already talked to you about parish registers, but parish chests also include things like vestry minutes, which basically show you the day-to-day administration of a parish. A parish at that time was very much the local government of the country, and you'll get a whole host of accounts, like churchwarden accounts. The churchwardens, for example, collected the church rents and obviously collected lists of people, of which your ancestor may be one. The overseers dealt with poor relief, and again, if your ancestor was not too well off, you may well see his name in the overseers' accounts. There are also, in the parish chest, constable beadle accounts, which is the law enforcement at the time. Surveyors' accounts, surveyors repaired the roads, mended the bridges, and often employed local labour. So you'll possibly see an ancestor working on a particular day repairing a road. You'll actually see charity accounts, which covered accidents or, if you like, acts of God. And you might well see your ancestor was a recipient of that sort of money. Where else is there? Well, there's quarter session records. Quarter sessions are obviously legal, but they also dealt with non-legal matters like a local militia, maintenance of county buildings, county rates, apprentices, licences, even lunatic asylums and administration of prisons. Manorial records were important prior to the parish and did the same sort of thing. It was basically the early local government, and it's very likely you may well see an ancestor in those records. Tax records were probably early forms of censuses. The government obviously wanted to collect as much money, so it wanted to put as many people into their net of collecting taxes. It's not much different to today. So you've got a whole host of resources that you can actually fill in the dates that you get from basic genealogy, and you'll get a much better idea of who your ancestors were and how they lived. Now, if you want to know how to get hold of those records, then make sure you visit our website, and it's www.bringyourfamilytreetolife.com. And finally, to find out how to begin to bring your family tree to life and how to research and write your family history, because you'll eventually want to write up all your information, hopefully, then go to bringyourfamilytreetolife.com and get our free report, which is called 7 Simple Mistakes to Avoid when Researching and Writing Your Family History. Thank you, and I'll hopefully see you another day in another video.